All right, welcome to the SnydeReport. I am your host, Gary Snyder. With me today, as well, you can see him right there. Former ambassador, former U.S. senator, former congressman, Joe Donnelly. Welcome, Senator.
Well, thank you so much for having me with you today. And
now,
happy 4th to everybody and for all those families in Texas. So our prayers are with them at every moment of this horrendous situation.
just horrifying down there. And as someone with 6 daughters, I cannot imagine what they're going through right now.
Every child a blessing, right? And it's just crushing.
It is. Now, before we get on to other things, I did wear my shirt for you today. So
thank you very much.
That was a birthday present. So I have every shirt that's been put out. So
I was checking with my family over the weekend. I said, hey, I think we're playing at Lambeau Field this year against Wisconsin. I said, has anybody done anything on tickets? And they looked and they go, well, we figured you would. So the answer is no.
Well, if you can't, no one can. Let me just, you were the ambassador to the Vatican. You were a U.S. senator. You were a congressman. Politically speaking, do you ever just pinch yourself and go, wow, did I really just do all that?
Yeah, sometimes I look and I go, I was so blessed. The people of Indiana gave me the chance to serve in Congress and in the Senate. And obviously, that's what helped lead to the ambassadorship because of the work I did with President Biden on the auto rescue, on the Affordable Care Act, on our economy, on so many things. And it really is something to think about that, when we started our first campaign, we had about $5 and a couple of phone cells or cell phones. Maybe they were called phone cells, back then, but that was about it. And sitting there and people going, well, what's your path to victory? And I said, we've got it. And they said, well, what is it? And I said, well, you'll see it. I'm thinking, hopefully we'll have one by then.
Now, as an ambassador to the Vatican, obviously you had left when we got the new Pope.
Right. Yeah.
But my question to you, and this is a really serious question. So are you a Cubs fan or a God's team fan?
I am a White Sox fan, which is God's team as far as I know. Since Pope Leo has worn a White Sox hat, was caught on camera at the World Series in 2005. And if you are from the South Side, even if you're a Cubs fan, you don't admit it. You have to be a White Sox fan.
Well, as the big ugly bill, I'm not going to call it by what they do, but the big ugly bill just passed. And we do this podcast for several reasons in front of my kitchen table. How is that going to affect Hoosiers sitting at their table like this, trying to make ends meet, trying to pay the rent or buy a home or buy food or now worrying about their health care?
It's going to make it much tougher, Gary. I was there for the 2017 tax cut or tax bill. It was a tax cut for the very, very wealthy. It was a train wreck for everybody else. And that was the predecessor, in effect, like the one right before this one. And I remember the Washington Post sent out a reporter to Indianapolis to meet with me because they said, you voted against this bill. I said, I did. And the reporter said, well, I was in Kokomo yesterday at the Markland Mall, and I figured I'd ask folks. And so the reporter asked folks at the Markland Mall, and she said, people were in favor of this. And I said, well, what did you ask them? She said, I asked them if they wanted a tax cut. I said, yeah, but that's like just saying, do you want a really good meal at a restaurant? And the answer is, of course I do. And the back end is, you didn't tell them they get a bill. And Hoosiers are really smart. Hoosiers have a lot of common sense. And when they looked at that bill, and it was explained to them that all the benefits went to the wealthy, all the burdens were carried by working families in Indiana and our other states, they were overwhelmingly against it. And they're against this bill, too, for the same reason. But this is the 2017 bill in effect on steroids. It will increase our national debt by over $3 trillion. It takes your breath away when you think right now, as we sit here, Gary, the national debt is over $36 trillion, which is more than the annual GDP of the United States, of everything we do. And we've run up a debt larger than that. These bills will have to be paid by our children, and we're paying them now. In 2024, the payment on interest on our debt was $1.1 trillion. It was more than the defense budget of the United States of America, more than the defense budget. And so in effect, even if we run everything else even, that our revenues match our outflows, we will run $1 trillion deficit every year because of the interest bill. You know, if like the regular business, you see in a lot of times with private equity where they get a business and they run up the debt on it and the business winds up going bankrupt. And it goes bankrupt not because the business operations were any different than they used to be. It's just that all of a sudden they have this huge debt burden on them. Well, we have that now. And it's a scary thing. When I left the Senate in 2018, my final speech was about our debt and about how dangerous it was. And I said, if we don't fix this, it's going to overwhelm us. And the truth of it is, what it will result in is for that kitchen table right there, interest rates will be higher because loans that could be made to families, that money is the first person online for the loan is the government. And so when you're competing with the government for a loan, the interest rates are going to be higher for you. So our interest rates will be higher. Our inflation will be higher. Our overall government will be on our bonds will cost much, much more as a government. And so all of the things that they're doing in running up this debt comes back on us because we have to pay it. Our own interest rates for when we want to buy a house, they're pretty well stuck up around 7% right now. And that's tough. It's really tough for a family. And this bill makes it more difficult to lower those interest rates. When you look to buy a car, it makes it tougher to buy a car because the interest rates will be stuck or going higher. When you look at our situation with Medicaid, the estimate, Gary, is about 200,000 Hoosiers are going to lose health care. Think of that. 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are not going to have health care anymore.
And that doesn't include people that are going to lose the subsidies. I saw on
That's
TV
right.
that maybe 4 out of 5 people on the Affordable Care Act pay under $10 a month for their premium. That's gone now.
That's right. So all of a sudden, their medical costs will be unsustainable. And you look at this, Gary, and you go, so who benefits? And it's the very, very, very richest. It's the Elon Musks of the world. It's the billionaires of the world. And the other part is they're not asking for a tax cut, if you know what I mean. It's not like there's a group going, hey, we need to have this now. Point to doing this other than to do it. And when you do it, you dramatically damage the United States. You damage Hoosiers. You damage Hoosiers' chances to get better, more affordable health care, better, more affordable mortgages, better jobs. It's really, really damaging.
Joe, can you hold through a quick break?
I sure can.
You're listening to the SnydeReport with Gary Snyder. We'll be right back. All right, this is the part of the SnydeReport where we thank our sponsors, and we have a growing list. So let's start with Robin Winston. Robin has been there when we first sent out our first email, 147 subscribers. We're now over 108,000. So thank you, Robin Winston, and helping us get the podcast going in the right direction. Next up is our good friend, former Congresswoman Jill Long Thompson. Her book, Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. Get that anywhere you buy your books. Also, former 2-term governor, 2-term U.S. Senator Evan Bayh. Evan has been a sponsor of the newsletter, now jumps on board with the podcast. Congressman Andre Carson. Congressman Carson has been there from the start. We're glad to have him over here on the newsletter now. He needs your help to win re-election next year, so make sure you support Congressman Carson. Next up, State Representative Cherish Pryor. Cherish has been there from the start on the newsletter, joining us on the podcast now. So is State Senator Greg Taylor. I want to thank Senator Taylor for all of his support through the years. Next, we have a couple of new sponsors. First up is Indiana Citizen. You want to check out their new project, One Heartbeat Away. Do Christian nationalists have an agenda for Indiana? You know, all you have to do is look at the lieutenant governorship and you can see right away that they do. So thank you, Indiana Citizen. Next up is Jump Laundry. You can visit them at jumplaundry.com. They have home pickup. They do your dry cleaning, wash and fold with, I might add, no judgments, and next day service. So if you're in a crunch for time, you don't want to do your own laundry, get a hold of Jump Laundry at jumplaundry.com or at 317-740-5011. And they will take care of all of your laundry needs.
It's the Brickyard 400, presented by PPG.
This is such a prestigious place and such hallowed ground.
This 3-day NASCAR Crown Jewel event features the NASCAR Xfinity Series Pennzoil 250.
This is the Brickyard. This is Indianapolis. This is the coolest racetrack in the world.
Don't miss the stars of NASCAR. Drive for a chance to kiss the bricks. Brickyard Weekend tickets available now at ims.com.
Welcome back to the Snide Report. I am your host, Gary Snyder. We are speaking today with former U.S. Ambassador to the Vatican, former U.S. Senator Joe Donnelly. Joe, just before the break, you were talking about the debt. When we take a look at Republicans, more specifically Indiana Republicans, and you can go down the line, whoever's in office now, either at the U.S. Senate or Congress, they pound their chest about being deficit hawks, when most of them have voted for nearly a quarter of the debt that we have run up in our 249 years. You talk about the debt being $36 trillion. It's going to go up. It's going to be close to $40 trillion. And Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans are going to be responsible for almost a quarter of that alone.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking because we don't have to do these things. We can grow our economy. We can continue to lower interest rates. We can take a look at each other and say, enough on this. We can't continue to spend the way we do. And at the same time, we can't continue to have the lower revenues that we do as well. When Bill Clinton had a balanced budget in 2000, the year 2000, and think of this, the fear of economists was, well, we're going to have no debt. And we should have a little bit. I used to think, why, right? In Bill Clinton, revenues were about 20% as a percentage of GDP, and expenses were about 20% of GDP. Now, expenses right now are about 23, right in that neighborhood. Revenues are about 17, right in that neighborhood. So as complicated as this is, there's still a way to do this. You know, you look and you go, okay, and the way isn't the way it was done, where you send out notes to all the federal employees and say, hey, we want you to leave. Because then you wind up with not enough people in the National Weather Service or in NOAA, the National Oceanographic
Or FEMA.
Service that provides for proper weather forecasts. You have not enough people on agricultural services. There's a smart way to do this, and it can be done. But what we've seen with things like Doge, where in effect you take out just like an axe, that doesn't work. So as we look at this, we're doing the worst possible thing right now at the worst possible time. The time you do big bailout bills like this tax cut is basically a bailout for billionaires. You do that when the economy is collapsing, like in 2008, when we did the TARP program, which helped to make sure the banks didn't collapse. Now, the thing about that is we actually got every penny back. We gave out loans, and the money all came back because of the terms that we put in place. You do these things when there's an emergency, when you're in a world war and you have to spend. But we are going staggeringly more into debt at a time when we have a full employment economy. It makes no sense.
When you look at the landscape of Indiana politics, I was speaking with Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned a lot of things, but one of the things that really stuck with me is we got to realize that we're not college professors speaking to students.
Amen.
We have to start talking in language that everyone understands. It's not food deserts, it's hunger, and he went down the line. So how do Indiana Democrats get back into the game? And my question to you, you've been around a lot of places here of late. What's the future of Joe Donnelly in Indiana politics?
Well, the future of Joe Donnelly is a lot less important than making sure that Hoosier families have food on the table. And how do we talk about it? We talk about it that, look, it's harder for you to get a home. Your mortgage payments are going to be higher because of this. That money that would have been in your pocket is in the money of Elon Musk. It's not trying to pit one against the other. It's just the fact that the monies that are going to be paid out to the richest are coming from average working families. It's got to come from somewhere, and it's coming from us. It's coming from Hoosiers. That when you look out and your car payment's another $60 a month higher, it's because of this bill. When your mortgage goes up a couple of points from like 6.5%, if you're looking to maybe move, and it's now 7%, which means hundreds of dollars more, it's because of this bill. The things we should have done were to help working families, to make it so that things are more affordable, that rents are not exploding, that housing's available. These are the kind of things. Our focus has to be like a laser every day on making sure that the families of our state get a square deal and a fair deal.
Last question for you before we let you go. A long time ago, I had the honor of visiting Congressman Andy Jacobs in his home.
You're a lucky man.
I was. And on his walls just were some of the coolest political memorabilia. And as someone who's a politico like myself, I was in awe of some of that memorabilia. What memorabilia hangs on your walls that you're most proud of?
Behind me is a picture of being in Iraq with the Indiana National Guard and spending time with them. I remember they wanted to sit in Saddam's chair in the palace. And I don't mean to take up all your time, but they wanted to sit in Saddam's chair in the palace. And a bunch of the higher ups were like, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. And they said, Joe, if you could do one thing, get us in there. And it was like, yeah. And I said, well, I want to meet with them, but it looks like the only place I can get to see them will be at the palace. And they're like, okay. So that's on the wall. A picture with Pope Francis is on the wall. Pictures of Indiana to remind you of who you work for. You work for the farmer who's trying to make ends meet and pass the farm on to the next generation. You work for the single mom in Terre Haute who's just trying to make it so that her kid can have a shot. One thing Pope Francis always said was, look, nobody is more important than anybody else in terms of the dignity and the decency of human beings. And I always said when I voted for the healthcare bill, they said, why? And I said, because the child in the red house who lives with a single mom who's struggling has just as much a right to get decent health care as a child in the greenhouse who may be with the wealthiest parents in town. And I believe with all my heart that Hoosiers feel that way too, that we all should get a shot, that we all should be treated fairly, and that's the job.
Joe, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Gary Snyder. He is not. He is Joe Donnelly. This is the SnydeReport, and we are out.